Hello, everyone. Here we are today on this beautiful sunny morning in the city of Los Angeles, recording another episode of TAY Talks. We hope you have enjoyed our previous recordings and feel inspired or motivated by their stories. Current and former foster youth, as well as those impacted by the juvenile justice system, face a lot of challenges throughout their lives. So we hope to build a platform for youth to feel comfortable sharing their stories and their experiences. With that, I would like to introduce you to our guest speaker, Michael. Michael, we're so glad to have you here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. It's good to be here. Having a lot of fun so far, just connecting with Elizabeth behind the scenes. And yeah, you guys' office is amazing. Really love it. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, definitely, and especially being part of NFYI and NFYI's LA chapter. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience in foster care?
Yeah, well, like Elizabeth said, my name is Michael Papias. Right now, my official role or career path, I'm the program director for a program we developed. It's been built by foster youth for foster youth. We're called Tú Eres Tú, which is Spanish for You Are You. And we are a program that's focused on the intersections of art, activism, and the foster youth identity. So basically, what we do is we host workshops across California where we bring art tools to spaces for foster youth to come, organize, create artwork, and get more comfortable talking about their identities. And this project actually began 2 years ago when I was a student at UC Berkeley. So in 2016, I went to UC Berkeley, went there for 5 years. Yeah, I think about like 5, 6 years I was up there, and I was able to develop this project. It started as a research project, got some funding, then it turned into a larger project, got some more funding, and right now I'm doing that full time. But um, but yeah, I mean we can definitely unpack that a bit more later. Uh, you said my foster youth experience. So I actually entered the system in 2009. I entered the system after my parents passed away. So I call myself a Mexican American orphan, and I hold that identity very, it holds a very big part of myself. I take it very seriously, and really, I think why I take it seriously is because I hear the term orphan appropriated a lot by other people who don't have that experience. So when I found out what that term meant, I saw a lot of people kind of push me to not take on that term, and they they push me indirectly by kind of like giving me faces, and then they push me directly by like certain people telling me like don't use that term, and if someone tells me not to do something, I'm gonna go ahead and do it more, and I really ran with that energy and I adopted that term for myself, and I really like I said I take it to heart. Um, but yeah, so I entered the system in 2009. I was growing up in Southern California with my mom and dad, both of them Mexican Americans. Well, my dad born in Mexico, my mom born here, but they, you know, I call myself first generation because that's what I am. The American part of my identity is pretty big. But really, like I said, I entered the system in 2009. Uh, I After they passed away, I moved to Lancaster. So I was raised by my aunt. So it was technically kinship care that I was placed under. I was raised with my two siblings, my older brother, my younger sister, and then also like seven cousins. So in one house there was like literally 10 of us at one point, 11, 12, just depending on like who was there, who wasn't, like who was at their dad's house that weekend and who wasn't. So really it was a really hectic space, but I was fortunate to be raised by someone who actually cared about us, who wanted us to stay together. I had learned that the the state wanted us separate because they felt like my aunt couldn't take care of all of us, but she made it. She got up in their faces and made sure that none of us were separated, and by none of us I mean my siblings. So I was fortunate to be raised with my brother and sister, and and yeah, I mean that was my experience. I grew up in Lancaster for 9 years, 8 9 years. Then, like I said, I went to school up in the Bay Area for 6 years, and yeah, I mean Lancaster, a very different city from other parts of Los Angeles. A very conservative city, a very white dominant city, and growing up there with my identities, I definitely felt othered. I was trying to navigate who I was in a space that didn't accept who I was, and yeah, I think that's what pushed me to leave and find somewhere else uh, that did embrace me for my identities, and that's when I was up in school, and I got really more comfortable with my identities up there.
Can you talk about a little bit about kinship and how that was as well?
Yeah, kinship care. It was dope. Like I think I know like research tells us that kinship care is like the best route, and that's the thing. Like there's pros and cons to that research, I think, and there's definitely gaps that are missing in that statement. I think kinship care is cool when that family is given that extra financial support and needs to be raising extra family members. My aunt, single mom, taking care of like all those kids, and at the same time working. Managing a full house of mouths to feed, and at the same time working, but being given like extra financial support is what she needed to make sure we were all fed, we all had clean clothes, and she made sure that was never compromised. That we always had those things and those really important uh, benefits. But yeah, I mean it was cool because it was like the aunt that we always visited. My parents. So it was always like, oh, we're gonna go see my tia Martha. So it was always fun. We were always like happy to go to her place. Um, I mean, things change obviously after you start living there. so
Yeah,
so it
definitely.
went from like going to visit your aunt to like, oh shit, like this is the house I'm
Yeah.
staying in for a while, and that also impacted the relationship with my cousins that I grew up with. So yeah, I mean like kinship care is great. Some obvious like issues are when it comes to financials, and then also the strain it puts on the family that was there first. You know what I mean? And and that's the thing that I realize is like the family that was living there first, like my aunt's family, had to take on like three extra lives and three extra responsibilities, and it definitely put a lot of pressure on everyone, and there's tension there. There was definitely fights when my aunt was at home. There's screaming matches, and and yeah, so there's some benefits to it. You get to be around people, you get to feel a little bit more comfortable, but at the same time, like you kind of go into it knowing that someone else's family is there, and immediately from the beginning, you're never calling yourself part of the family. You're calling yourself in addition to the family, and I
Yes.
think that that's probably where the beginning of that tension started. It is just like the framework that's used to kind of develop this structure of kinship care. So, I mean, compared to other folks, I definitely had I took the route that not all folks get and that definitely want and need them. But yeah. So I mean, yeah. I mean, it was pros and cons to it for sure.
I may ask, what time or during what age did you leave your aunt's care?
Yeah, so I actually went to school when I was 17 years old. Like I was always the young kid in the schools, like in middle school, high school. I was always the the youngest one asking for permission slips and all that, even in my like senior year of high school. And when I went to Berkeley, I was still asking for permission slips. Like I still had to get my aunt's signature because she was my legal guardian. So yeah, so so I was technically still in care, like because she was still signing my slips, signing me like at Berkeley, like when I first got there, they want to take a field trip out to San Francisco, and I needed someone's slip. They're like, if you're not 18, you need a permission from your guardian or parent. And I was like, well, so I had to ask my aunt to sign it from like 300 miles away, and it was like a whole trip. It was pretty funny. Um, but yeah, so when I left, I was technically still in care of 17. A few months into my first semester, I turned 18, and then from that point forward, from 18 to now, I've been on my own, like like on my own. Like I guess like that's like something to unpack a bit. Like obviously, I still have like my family support. I still have connections to people I know back home, but and the emotional support is real, so I still have that. But on my own, I guess like financially and other kind of forms of support, I guess like I've had like autonomy over my life these past few years. Just I get to decide what I get to eat that day.
Yeah.
My bank account gets to decide too,
Yeah.
but yeah, I get to decide what I do that day. I get to decide where I work, and so yeah. So for the past few years after I turned 18, I've kind of been doing that.
Wow, that's amazing. Having to go to school at 17 and, still being in care and stuff. Like, that's
Yeah.
amazing. With that, what are some challenges that you encounter in obtaining higher education?
Yeah, I, mean, I laugh at that because I got a bunch of stories, but I mean, I think the first one is when I first entered care, and then we can kind of go down the timeline of 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 my journey through higher education. So I entered care in middle school. I was fifth grade going to sixth grade, and like the last few years, those last few months of fifth grade, that's when we started transitioning into the foster care system. So did that. So my new school, sixth grade, I started in Lancaster, and like I said, it was a very different city. It was very white. It was very conservative, and I felt uncomfortable being a foster youth there. I just didn't feel like my identity was there, and I also just didn't feel comfortable telling people what I had just been through. I mean, like for years throughout my entire like middle school to high school, I was completely quiet about who I was. So so I think that was like my first like major issue that came up. You're in classes where everyone's supposed to be open and happy, but you can't tell anyone what you've been through, or you can't tell people about how you're feeling. So how am I supposed to be in a space where I'm supposed to be learning when I'm not even comfortable about my identity or don't even know what my identity is, right? So that was probably the biggest issue I had, and because of that, I wasn't comfortable to talk about my story later on, and it kind of set me up to be quiet for a long time. um, I mean, transitioning into a new school, so like foster care put me into a new school, it made me feel very uncomfortable there. Didn't feel comfortable about my identity, so those are two big issues. And then another thing, like Lancaster has a very big aerospace industry, so everyone there is telling you to do STEM. Like from the beginning, the moment I walked into that city, it was like, go do STEM, go do math, go do this. You're gonna get a good paying job. You're gonna be able to buy your happiness, basically buy a house, take care of a family, and there's this giant responsibility put on you. And me being a first generation, Chicano or Mexican American, I just kind of was stuck. A large part of me wanted to explore the arts. I was very interested in journalism at that point, photography, uh, self-expression through writing. I was reading Chicano authors and just kind of learning more about our history, and I was drawn there. But I knew, or not what I knew, but what I was being told was, don't go there because you're gonna end up broke. Go this way to STEM. You're gonna be unhappy for the rest of your life, but at least you'll have money to buy you a new car or something, right? So so I was just stuck. I never felt like I could be honest about anyone about what I wanted to do,
Hmm.
who I was, and also just day to day I didn't feel safe in that city, right? So um so yeah, I mean, I was just there, kind of like feeling stuck in school, just not really having a direction where I wanted to do what I needed to do in my life, and yeah, and it was actually until high school when I met my first teacher of color. So throughout my entire schooling education from elementary up, I only had teachers that were white, and also teachers that uh, are femme identifying, so they look like women. And this was the first time I had someone who was a person of color, but also femme identifying or femme presenting. My bad. Like they were like a woman of color, and and it was dope. It was like the first time I had. She gave us books that were written by people who weren't white authors. Like we had to read the Shakespeare stuff because she said that was part of the curriculum, so she had to do it. We got through it like in a month, and I was already tired of him. Like, bro, I can't read this. Like, I don't know what he's saying. I had to like go on the Spark Notes and just kind
Yeah.
of like figure it out. But then we had books by Rodolfo Anaya, my favorite Chicano author. We read Bless Me Ultima, and it was like the first time I actually had fun reading. I could never read a book before. I was just tired of or scared to read because, like I said, you're in a space where if you read, you look weak. You gotta be
Yes.
doing math or robotics to look like a man. So there's some issues of masculinity there too. But yeah, so I went down that route, and I found myself doing all my homework. I found myself enjoying what I was writing. I was doing homework like 5 weeks in advance, and like people were upset that I was like getting so far ahead, and I heard people like trash talking or like shit talking about what I was doing, and yeah, I was like, yo, like this is what I like doing. This is what I really want to do for the rest of my life, is explore this idea of writing, of ethnicity, culture, and learn more about what was taken from me. Because I think that's also like a motivation. Like thinking back on it, I entered the system and lost the two people who were supposed to teach me everything about my culture, right? Like the two people who are going to teach me my language, teach me about our history, our family history, our cultural history were completely gone. And I didn't know anything from them, or I didn't really get to learn too much from them, right? So, so I think that was also a big motivation for me is how do I learn more on my own, and how do I get to dictate for myself what I want to do, and yeah, so I mean that was like the biggest thing is just finally meeting someone who understood the importance of exploring race and ethnicity, and she gave it to me through books. She gave me more recommendations. She pushed me to read other works, and then I started picking up the books of like Malcolm X, MLK, and really learning for myself what I wanted to, and yeah, I mean just kind of I went down that route, started feeling more comfortable about myself, at least culturally. I was still completely quiet about my Foster Youth identity, and this was during high school. And then it was like application season, college application season. I didn't tell any of my family because they all still thought I was doing STEM. Like up till that point, they thought I was gonna be an aerospace engineer, and then but when I submitted my applications, I submitted under journalism, film, and media because I was taking a few film classes, a few film classes at my community college at that time, and I fell in love with it. I knew this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I was finding excuses to not do it, so I knew that's what I wanted to do. Like I was trying to find excuses to make everyone else happy, and I had to stop that and really just ask myself what I wanted. So when I was applying to college, I applied under film, media, and also journalism. And I didn't know anything about college. I went to college, high school. I went to all these things that were supposed to teach us about college. I didn't really pay too much attention to it, and I just applied to like some of the big universities. I stayed in California for those, the UC, CSUs, and I told myself, whatever college takes me, I'm gonna go. Like when I first got my first acceptance was from CSU Long Beach. I knew that was like right down the street from Lancaster, but I'm like, it's not Lancaster, so I'm going. And then I got a few more, and I applied to a lot up in Northern California because at that time I was really interested in San Francisco as a city. Um, I mean, I grew up in a valley that has giant valley walls, and inside that valley is just dark, you know, hot all the time, conservative. So I was looking for something like literally and metaphorically that would get me out of that valley, and really kind of take me somewhere that I could find myself, be comfortable, talk openly about who I am, and that meant, you know, deciding for myself to move hundreds of miles away from everything that had happened. So Northern California also was kind of like an imaginary space for me, where I'd be away from where I lost my parents, where I'd be away from my family for a bit, where I'd be away from that sense of pressure I felt in the valley, and really so that's kind of how I framed it in my head. I got accepted into a few schools. I got accepted into Berkeley. They offered me a scholarship that was gonna pay for everything, and I said, okay, yep, I'm going to Berkeley. I'm moving 300 miles away, and I did it, and yeah, but I mean those, like I said, I felt like from middle school to high school in that valley, I was just feeling very, I wasn't myself. I wasn't allowed to be myself. And then when I went to Berkeley, that's really where I started finding myself, like literally finding myself, finding my voice, finding the people who looked like me, who wanted to ask the same questions, and we were all finding our own answers up there, and it felt really dope.
Wow, that's amazing, especially navigating the system and navigating college. It's
Yeah,
quite tough, especially with, putting feeling all that pressure.
yeah.
Definitely feel that. Moving forward, what are some challenges you would say foster youth face aging out, especially moving on to college?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. Yeah, right now my sister is actually at UC Berkeley too, so we're changing the narrative of what foster youth can achieve, and I'm gonna let her tell her story. So I'm gonna definitely
No,
invite
yeah,
her to come down here and,
definitely.
and tell her story. But she's definitely inheriting some of the issues I inherited when I got there. Uh, the universities, I'm gonna be honest, they like to use our image and they like to raise our our entry into their campuses as something positive that they did, but you have to unpack a lot of that. First thing is, we got ourselves there, and I'm gonna be honest about that. Berkeley, yeah, they gave me an opportunity to go to school, but leading up to that point, I never heard of Berkeley until I got my
Yeah.
acceptance letter, right? So for like 12 years, my aunt was the one doing all the work. She was making sure I ate, she was making sure I had good, a place to live, a place to rest. My brother was there, encouraging me to get better, pushing me to he kind of feel that masculine male role model that I needed, a healthy male role model that I needed. My little sister was there, making sure that I knew I was a part of the family. So a lot of these universities want to take credit for us getting there, and I think we need to make sure we highlight who actually got us there. That's like my first issue. Um, the first thing that I want to put forward before I talk about the university and the issues we face there. But as soon as you get to that university, you get accepted, but they're basically making you relocate to attend their university, so they could use your image and they could get more funding from other places, and they increase their budgets, right? So in my head, I always saw myself, and I was told by a lot of folks there that you're the most valuable person on this campus. This university can't function without its students, right? So I was like, okay, I was kind of going into it with that mentality. I'm like, oh, they're gonna take care of me. They're gonna make sure I'm good, I'm healthy. They want it. They make sure they're gonna make sure my mental health is straight, my housing is good, I got food in my stomach. They should, right? Like they told me, come here. This is a big honor. You're the best university in the public university in the world. Come here. You're good. Your foster youth will take care of you, right? That's what they tell you to your face, and when you get there, you just see housing issues for your entire community members. Like everyone is struggling with housing up there. They tell me you're gonna pay $1,000 for a small bedroom, right? And we're nomadic people. Like we have a car full or trash bags full of our stuff that we have to take everywhere because we don't have somewhere to store anything, right? So you're telling me you bring all these people in, you make sure that their faces are on your pamphlets, but you're gonna tell me after that pamphlet or after that photo shoot, hey, good luck, you're on your own. And that's what I felt. Like, yeah, I had a scholarship that helped me and took care of me, but how am I supposed to function when my peers, my actual like foster peers are coming to me talking to me about their housing issues, right? It's just like that kind of guilt, that survivor's guilt that you have. It was like, yeah, I made it, but shoot, the person next to me that I'm eating lunch with is over here just kind of bawling their eyes out, telling me about the issues they're facing, right? There was that. So housing is like one of the biggest issues I saw up there, and I feel like at each of these universities is never addressed seriously. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you bring us here is great. Like the other thing I heard is a few years ago, Berkeley said that they're going to become a Hispanic serving institution, which means that they're going to be recruiting a lot more Latinos to come onto the campus. It's great. You can bring every Latino from California to your campus. I would applaud if you did that. But you're going to tell me they're coming in here to inherit the same things that we inherited: housing issues, food insecurity, mental health issues, or the lack of mental health support. So you're basically bringing us in, you boost up your image, but you do none of the work to actually make sure we flourish on your campus. You make sure you don't do any of the work to make sure we graduate on time, or offer us any kind of support to make us feel comfortable on your campus. And that kind of level of, I want to say we got appropriated at that time, or we still are appropriated, is our image is used for their benefit, and they don't need to do any of the work behind the scenes to make sure we flourish on that campus and really excel. So, so those are some of the issues I had seen. Housing was definitely the biggest one I felt. Like my last year at Berkeley, I had to move like 3 times in one year. Uh, During the winter, when you're a freshman, they put you in the dorms, but during the winter, foster youth really don't have places to go. Like we might not have a family to go to for Christmas or any kind of major holiday that time. The dorm rooms close. So they say you better find somewhere to go because you're not going to be living here. And the support program on campus, they would put foster youth in hotels for a whole like month or two, right? So just kind of like you're telling me that you're bringing us here, you understand our identities, You have giant institutions that do research on our community. You have professors who are masters, world leaders on our topics, but you guys can't even produce what you guys are, or produce the solutions y'all are putting forward on your campus, right? So I'm always gonna appreciate the opportunity I had, but I'm never gonna appreciate the campus if it continues to sell you a lie, you know. And I mean, that was like the biggest thing I saw was definitely housing and its impact. You know, if you don't have housing, then you're not gonna have stability in your life. You're not gonna be able to go to class on time. You're not gonna feel comfortable when it comes to finances. You're not gonna be able. You're not gonna have a space to cook your food that night. So like housing was probably like the biggest issue I saw there, and its impact on your schooling, its impact on your graduation rate, its impact on every other part of your life is just insane. And yeah, I mean, if there's anything I could change going back, it'd be to kick the president out of that mansion that they bought him, and to put Foster in that space, and really just ask ourselves, what are we doing here? Are we just, and I think the university knows what it's doing, but they just need that constant pressure on them, or else they're not going to change.
Definitely. And if I can go ahead and ask this, what are some resources or programs or maybe even a mentor
Mhm.
that helped you along the way with your journey?
Yeah, I got like 30 mentors, and each of them, like, I hit them up for every issue I might have when it comes to schooling. Like, I have some professors that I hit up when I need questions answered about research, others about housing, others about applying to grad school. It's different things like that. So I definitely have been fortunate to find have or create a long list of people I can reach out to when I need help. But the biggest supporter on Berkeley's campus, and any FOSS youth out there going to higher education or going to community college, find your FOSS youth support program on your campus. They could be called the Guardian Scholars, the Resilient Scholars, the Renaissance Scholars, the Hope Scholars, the Fire Scholars at UCI. I can shout out every every campus program that we work with too in our program or in our workshops. But yeah, those people are the ones that are actually trying to make sure foster youth don't fall through the cracks in higher education. So the Hope Scholars are the ones that I interacted with at Berkeley's campus, and their program director Charlie, one of my favorite people in the entire world. She made sure that my housing was always straight. She made sure that I had the extra resources I needed to do well in classes and schools. She made sure we had food in our community room, so we had food to take to class and eat before or during lunch. So small little solutions like that help alleviate the pressure we feel as foster youth in higher education. If I don't have to worry about the next meal I'm paying for, like if I have a free lunch, it could be a simple lunch, but as long as it's free and I have something in my stomach, I can go to my next class feeling a little bit better. If I have a space where we can just talk, I meet other foster youth in higher education, and I'm just like talking to them like, yo, this professor sucks. Yo, I got this microaggression, or someone was just like being hella ignorant about our identity. I have someone where I can cut it up with, and we're just having a night like honest conversation that isn't academic focused. We don't have to be talking about theory. We can just be talking about our raw, visceral emotions, and in that way you don't gotta explain so much sometimes. You can just be around other people and be like, yo, this person sucks ass, and that's it, and just kind of be on that level of intimacy, vulnerability, and finally feel like where you have a space to just kind of be yourself. And that's really where you excel as a student, as an educator, as a scholar, somewhere where you're comfortable, where you get to ask tons of questions and just feel like you're not alone. And the Berkeley Hope Scholars was that program for me. After I met them, that's really where I found my voice. That's where I got comfortable with my identity. That's where I found the term orphan for myself, and that's really where I started feeling like I had some control over my life in higher education. And it sucked. I found them 3 years late. Like I found them 3 years, 3 years into my schooling there. So only 2 years I really got to be with them, but in those 2 years I got to be this loud person. I got to talk about my identity. I got to host workshops. I got to really grow into myself. So if I had found them my first year, I would have been even louder. I would have been even more, I think I would have caused that university more trouble than those scholarships paid for. And yeah, so to all foster youth out there going to higher education, please find that program support. And like I said, these universities, you don't have to like them, but these people in them, that are actually out there trying to support you and make sure that you succeed, those are the ones that you really that I always like. And and yeah, I mean, like another person that really played a big impact on my life was Dr. Joe Barrick in the social welfare department in at UC Berkeley. She she was actually someone who cares about our identities, and I felt was sincere in her approach to us. She gave us opportunities. She pushed us to think in new ways, and she was my mentor for the research project I began as my senior honors thesis. And and yeah, I mean, she just every time she held a meeting with me, she would just ask how I'm doing, how my siblings are doing. You know, just small things that no one else really cares about when you're in university. Just little ways to make sure that I feel comfortable with her, and she would always offer herself as a resource. I was up until 2 in the morning writing my thesis, and I'd be emailing her, and she would respond right back, and just like little things like that. Like I know she's a professor and she has like her own responsibilities, but she would always make sure she carved out time for her mentor or the people she was mentoring, and she made sure I always felt safe. Uh, I was listened to. Any question I had, she would be sincere and patient with me. Right? I'm a first generation Latino. I'm a first generation um, foster student, so she understood that I'm not going to know everything, and she really kind of walked me through everything step by step in research, and because of that, I've been able to build a career in research now, and I do that part time. So she really gave me the skills to make sure I thought in new ways, and also kind of set me up financially too. Kind of giving me an opportunity that a job opportunity I didn't even know I was building, or skills I didn't even know I was building for a future job opportunity. So big shout out to Dr. Barrick.
Yeah, definitely. All this inspiring and very motivating. So, my question to you, what keeps you inspired? What keeps you motivating? What keeps you wanting to keep reaching for higher goals?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's something I've been unpacking recently too for myself. And it's like a conversation I had with a colleague of mine, a peer, a community member. I can give him a bunch of names, but really he's been a really great person to kind of bounce ideas off of. And we had this conversation one time, like it was about like the names that these programs adopt. So like the Hope Scholars, right? Like the idea of hope is really cool, and he was kind of breaking it down for me, and we were talking it out. But he was saying something along like the idea of hope is really cool, but it's a passive term. You're waiting for something to happen. You're waiting for someone else to find a solution. You're hoping that it all plays out. So we started talking, and I kind of started doing my own readings and unpacking it for myself a bit more. And I really like the idea of struggle. Like struggle means struggle for me is a verb. It's active, it has an action to it, and you're engaged in it, right? So again, I think when I look back in my foster youth experience, my education experience, sometimes I was hoping things would play out. Like I was quiet, sitting back, waiting for something to happen and for everything to fall in line. But as soon as I found the Hope Scholars, as soon as I found these other folks that gave me the language to kind of think on my own, I realized I was leaning more into struggle. And that's when I found my voice. I found my voice through struggle. And now I'm engaged in it all the time. In any space where someone tries to ask me like what's a foster youth, I'm gonna run down on you and tell you what it is, and I'm gonna be engaged in that work for the rest of my life, because I'm gonna live with this identity for the rest of my life, right? And I got tired of being in spaces where solutions were being built by folks who studied us, right? And then in that way, I felt like, again, it felt like I was like some kind of test subject where people were looking at my story and just using it for their own gain or for their own solution, instead of asking us what we want or asking us what we need. So yeah, so that the idea of struggle, really kind of pushes back against that idea of feeling like you've been controlled your entire life, feeling like you had no, like you were kind of suffocated in that valley that I grew up in, feeling like you were constantly policed, and the idea of struggle, you get to engage in that at all times and get to push back on it, get to yell back, get to shout back, get to make sure that no one controls who you are or going to be or who you were. And really that idea of pushing back against the past, present, and future is what I'm engaged in at all times. and understanding too that this isn't just metaphorical, like this is literal. You know, these 2 years, 3 black foster youth have been murdered across this country. You know, from in each state. And I know some people in California are like, well, that happened out in Wisconsin or that happened out in New Mexico. I don't see like imaginary lines in our community, and I don't see some fictitious border stopping me from caring about what's happening to our people. You know, in the same valley I grew up, four, no, three Latino foster youth or three Latino youth who interacted with the foster youth or child welfare system were murdered in about in the span of like 5 to 8 years. I can't remember the exact statistic, but you're telling me the same place I grew up is where my people are being sent to die. And when I put it in those terms, you know, I wake up with a motivation to make sure that I take my work seriously, that is not just on paper, that is not just in this theoretical, metaphorical spot in my head or in our society, but to understand in real terms that blood has been shed, that people are dying, and it's not by accident. That members of the state are coming out here and killing us. The members of the state are being ignorant, which is leading to our deaths. And when I put it in those terms, I know it's pretty heavy to take on, but the work that I've done, the the readings that I've done, you know, the tools that I've learned in higher education have taught me to inherit all that and make sure I use it in a, I'm not gonna say positive way, but make sure I use it in a way where we can help folks who are now entering the system. So in that way, I'm constantly engaged and always making sure my critical thinking lens is always on to dissect anything that people put in front of me, and that way I'm always engaged in the work.
Um, if I can ask you this moving
Yeah.
forward, what are you currently doing now? And also, can you give us a little inside view of Tu Eres Tu as well?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So what I'm doing now, like I mentioned earlier, I'm doing research work. So I do that part time, and that research work I've made sure is also focused on the child welfare system. So I work part time for a company called Evident Change. They're a nonprofit that's focused on improving social systems. So in that work, we're doing work on the crossover youth identity. So folks who've entered both the child welfare system and also the incarceration system. So in that work, we're constantly engaged again in struggle, making sure that our research is intentional in highlighting this community, but at the same time, producing solutions that the community wants. So that work is being done. I'm also a part-time researcher at UCLA on this other project that's focused on foster youth experiences in education, the K-12 education in California, and again, making sure that I'm giving back the tools that I learned to improve our systems, and also be engaged in work that benefits community members. And so I'm doing that part time, both those part time, and then full time I run our program called Do It As Do. So like I said, 2 years ago we started as a research project at UC Berkeley. I conducted a research project that focused on the experiences of Latinos in California's child welfare system. And again, it was just kind of bringing my own personal identity into our research to make sure we were engaged in something that was important to me and also the community. That research had taught us that folks were leaving the system with an identity deficit, which basically means folks were leaving more insecure, less connected to their cultural identity, and less social. So, what we wanted to do was create a solution that was led by us, community members, right? Like I said earlier, I feel like a lot of people put forward solutions that aren't part of the system or aren't part of the community. And we really wanted to make sure that we develop something for ourselves. So I took that data back to Berkeley. I said, yo, y'all gave us all this money. I'm not going to wait for some nonprofit to take this and do something with it. I'm going to do it. And they said, whoa, okay, okay. And then they gave me some money. We built a pilot project out in the Bay Area. I was working with 3 youth digitally, like on Zoom, because this was all during COVID. And really it was a dope opportunity. Uh, I was just making it work. Like we were running into issues every week, but I was making sure that we engaged in the work and really, um, had an end goal and we wanted to achieve, and we did it. We were able to bring in some really dope artists. One from Canada, one from Texas, I'm from Southern California. This was all over Zoom, but we had a photographer who was published in Magnum Photography and had a long portfolio working with great artists. We had a dope Latino writer from Texas, and he currently just published a book. And it was just really great opportunities, and I mean, really great artists that we brought in. And again, engaging and make sure we create opportunities for the community. It was just our intention to make sure, you know, my idea of education is that I had gotten a lot of opportunities that I never got in the valley, that I never got when I was living with my parents, and I wanted to make sure that when I create my structure of education for my students, we're doing the same thing, but I'm talking about bringing in artists to teach our community members how to create artwork. So that's what we did in our pilot program. 6 weeks long. Everything's engaged or everything's happening over Zoom. But artists come in, they teach our community members how to use their cameras, how to use their writing skills, how to use their design skills to build their own projects. And it was really dope. So we took the results of that pilot program, applied to a few grants at Berkeley. They gave us more money to turn into a full-time program. And that's really where Through It Astute kind of started lifting off. And I have this favorite line from one of my artists, one of my favorite music artists. He's called Benny the Butcher, and he says, "Last year was about branding. This year is about expanding." And I took that bar pretty seriously, and I took it into this last year, where we started building our brand and also building to expand our work. And yeah, so this past year we've been hosting workshops, like I said, in-person workshops across California. This past month we hosted about 8 or something like that, 8, 10. We traveled across California from the Central Valley. We were at CSU Fresno's campus, Northridge campus, Lancaster. We hosted a few out there in the AV, and then up to the Bay Area, so in Berkeley as well. And really, like I said, what we're trying to do is create more opportunities for our community members to engage in artwork, and to really take artwork seriously in our activism. So we bring cameras. Right now, I brought a camera for NFY to check out. We bring film cameras. We bring Polaroid cameras, screen printing tools, block printing tools, paint, everything that you could think of. Any tool that you might be interested in exploring, we bring. We want to make sure folks are in a space where they meet other FOSS youth, where they're in a space they can understand the role of art and activism, and also in a space where you could just finally be yourself. Like I said, I grew up in a space where I couldn't talk about art, I couldn't talk about my identity. So what I did was I created a whole program where we could talk about art and our identities together, and in that way, I hope I could reach other, quote unquote Michaels out there, or other people, that were young, afraid while in the system, and can really just be themselves for a few minutes, not a few minutes, a few hours, because our workshops last hours, and yeah, I mean, and it's been a lot of fun, and this is just the beginning. What we're really doing is trying to build an infrastructure built by FOSS youth for FOSS youth. So that means developing our own independence. What does FOSS youth ownership look like? What does FOSS youth publishing look like? I'm tired of going to a newspaper and asking them to publish our work or my work. I'm tired of asking a museum to give us a space where we can publish community work. I want to build it. We need to own it, and we got to make sure people listen.
Yes.
And that's what I learned in my education. I'm a product of ethnic studies. I'm a product of a lot of these movements that understand the importance of ownership, of independence, and yeah, I mean, that's the energy we're taking into this next year.
We attend some of your workshops, and honestly, it's been really inspiring to see all this FOSS youth come together. It's very inspiring to be able to have some space to just be able to create some artwork and be able to speak and also show some type of activism, because that's definitely something that I took away from that. Being able to have that voice, even if it comes through art, it definitely helped me a lot. And I want to thank you for actually coming to TAY Talks and giving us a little bit of time and space to talk about your journey within foster care and the struggles that you faced up to this day. We do appreciate it. And I'm pretty sure our listeners as well will appreciate all the information that you had gave out, and I hope that they can take something away from that. But moving on to our last section of the recording, one question that I have for you would be, if you had a magic wand and could change one thing in the foster care system based off your experience, what would it be and why?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a lot of things I would change, but the biggest one, I think I wouldn't change the foster youth. I would change the people around the system, and by that I mean, like I said, I grew up in a space where I could never be myself, and I think that wasn't because of me. I think it was because of where I was growing up. So the idea of creating a safe space is great. Like I like the idea of hosting a meeting and making sure it's a safe space. But there's some really dope theorists out there who also problematize that too and say, why do we need to feel safe? We should feel uncomfortable when changing. But I'm not gonna go down that route. I'm gonna go a different way, and and I'm tired of just being in a small room and that's only our safe space on a campus. I'm tired of being in a small room that's our only safe space in an entire building. I want that entire building to be safe. I want the entire community to be safe. I want the entire state, country, world to be safe for our identities. And I think when we start changing the stigma attached to us by letting us speak, I think that's what it is. I think we need to find our own language, our own definition. One of my favorite artists, or not artists, they're an artist. One of my favorite poets, thinkers, theorists, educators, Audre Lorde. Audre Lorde, one of my favorite bars that they have is self-determination is having the ability to define, name, and speak for yourself. And with that, that was like the a final thing I learned at Berkeley. It was like one of the final pieces I read was by Audre Lorde. And it was that reading, and I finally found the word that I was looking for: self-determination. I didn't realize that's the word I needed, but for so many years that's what I was searching for: self-determination, being able to define myself, take ownership of myself, take control of my life, and that's what we need as foster youth. So my magic wand would I would smack the system on its head and make sure to remove that stigma, to stop looking at me sideways when I say I'm a foster youth. That when I call myself an orphan is because there's a political history and a theoretical framework I've developed for myself, and I have the ability to say it. But I need Stephen Colbert, I need all these other people, all these artists who keep bringing the orphan into their little jokes to stop and to start crediting us for what we are. And I think in that route, we take that route where we are able to own our identities. We're able to feel comfortable where we're not when the or when our teacher comes over to us and whispers that we're a foster youth, they need to say it out loud. And they need other people to change for us and for us to not change for them and make other people comfortable. And the other people need to start taking responsibility. And I'm talking about every person needs to start taking responsibility to create a space where all of us can just be open about who we are. You know, like I said, if I had found that program 4 years earlier, my entire higher education I would have felt comfortable. But if you take that even further, if someone, if if we had created a safe space or a safe community in middle school, that's 10 years or 15 years where I would have been comfortable about who I am. And I would have been, like I said, I would have been even further than I am now. I would have been someone that's even louder, someone that's creating more solutions, someone who is more well informed, and other people around me would have learned too, and we would have been able to create better solutions for us. And in that way, I think I think we messed up a long time ago by stigmatizing the identity, by controlling the identity, and by never letting us define ourselves. And I think that's how I'm gonna end it, is just helping people leave understanding that they need to feel that they don't need to make other people or accommodate other people anymore. That our community is our community, and that I'm a member of your community. And if anyone ever talks to you any kind of way, call me, and I'm gonna be right there, screaming with you at them, because I'm tired of our community having to take on the responsibility of making other people feel comfortable and safe, and it's finally their turn to make sure we're safe.
But definitely working together and pushing forward and advocating, continuing with this activism is definitely something we can do for our community to push forward.
100%.
So, like I said earlier, I do want to thank you. Thank you for speaking with us. Thank you for being here and talking about your experience. We all know that sometimes it's not easy for current and former foster youth or those who were in kinship to come forward and kind of advocate and talk about their experiences. So, definitely.
Yeah, I want to thank you too. Thank NFYI for this opportunity, TAY Talks. And this is exactly, you are doing exactly what we just talked about today. The idea of foster youth ownership, foster youth infrastructure. What does that look like? And make sure you take that with you. And TAY Talks is going to be instrumental in that. You know, what does independent communication, independent publishing look like? And y'all are part of that conversation. Y'all are leading it. So,
Yes.
so y'all gotta make sure y'all keep it going. Invite me back.
No, yes, definitely.
But no, thank you again.